Hey everyone, welcome to the ComicBase Livestream. I'm your host, Pete Bickford, and for the next hour or so, we're going to be getting into some very interesting stuff. A little bit of ComicBase news to get you going, but then we're going to get into, I feel like I should be like saying like, begun the AI wars have. But anyway, we'll be getting into a couple of times when the cops were actually getting called over the weekend for people who had the audacity to be selling AI-based artwork or using AI at Comic Cons around North America this last week. So it's been fascinating, and it's a very interesting discussion. So we'll be getting into it. So in the meantime, though, I do want to say hi to everyone here. Thank you. I just want to first of all say hi to Department of Comics, first to the door here. Checking in from Northern Florida. Chris Prizal's in the house. And by the way, hope everyone had a great Labor Day weekend. It was terrific over here. We did the brisket, came out. It only took 15 and a half hours of smoking, but we got her done, and it was delicious. Mike Beam over here from Vancouver. 78 degrees, warmy, cloudy skies. Gregory Hecht in the house, our moderator. It looks like things are starting to cool down around the country. Excellent. South Jersey's prelude to the fall. Rob Weinberg from out in Toledo. Summer temporarily back in Toledo. Fall due tomorrow. Yeah, we'll see how that goes. And Cyberspace Comics also joining us from the Pacific Northwest. And let's see here, Brian Price, Green Bay, Wisconsin. I didn't know you're from that Green Bay. Welcome. How did the Pack do this weekend? I did not catch any games. This is going to be the year that I maybe spring for ESPN. I don't know, but I got to get some football into my life because I am missing, especially college football these days. I'm probably going to make a trip up to Wisconsin for homecoming if I can possibly swing it. But anyway, so let's get into some news, and then we'll catch up with other things as we go. So first of all, if you guys did not catch the previous live stream or the one before, ComicBase 25.7 is the current release out there. It's our big wrap up of everything that's been going on the last couple of 3 months with ComicBase 2025. Please download it. You're going to need to in order to download any content updates, because it's everything that we've been doing for about the last 2-3 months, just to speed up the program, do all sorts of incremental things to make everything better. But definitely worth checking out. And you can get that just by going with ComicBase, say internet, check for updates, and download. It only takes a moment, and you should be able to get that. Other things, we had promised the ComicBase 2026, aka Metropolis is its code name, is coming up by end of summer. And if you guys are looking at the calendar and knowing the leaves are getting ready to turn, you'll notice that the summer is about to end. So work that one out. We're not changing our prediction on that. So anyway, and then finally, Filbo, the independent distributor that is bravely taking on the world of distributing all the little guys that did not get picked up by Lunar or Penguin Random House. We are actually incorporating their data right as we speak into ComicBase. So yes, you should see that. We just had an update that came out just a few minutes ago. But we will see the Filbo catalog in the next one, which actually only got about 120 items, or I think 102 items in it. But you know what? We want to make sure the little guys have got some representation here, because, hey, we all cheer for the little guy. And I think that's going to be a theme as we go forward on this whole thing. So look for that, and we shall also be able to keep up with their new catalogs as they come out as well, because we're building that kind of import capability into our back end for our content team. So, which, by the way, our content team passed a milestone this last weekend. They got caught up with every single damn last thing for one sparkling moment on, I believe, Saturday. Everything from January till now, from all the distributor catalogs, all the auction listings, all the corrections everyone had sent in, just thousands upon thousands and thousands of things. All the backlog of every single thing actually got drained dry for one brief shining moment, and it was quite glorious indeed. And I remember going out, and saying, "Wow, this is amazing! I am now going to go out and have a drink and watch a movie or something." And of course, when I came in the office on Tuesday, and I said, "Hey guys, how's it going?" And they're like, "Yeah, we have about 7,000 new corrections in since that day, so we'll be playing catch up again, because that is the normal state of life around here. We have a flood. I do mean a flood of data." Now, let me see if I can pull this up. I get a little scorecard sent to me every week after we push an update. Let me see if I can pull the one from today. Put this up here. No, here. Dragging this over to my monitor. scapping it into my media bay because I can do these things. I know how to do this live streaming thing. I'm good at this. I tell myself I'm qualified and talented, and people like me. All right, here we go. This is the score from today. You can download this one right now. 1,181 new items because we filled in everything ahead of time. 6,229 price and issue updates. 4,692 new covers, giving us a total of 1.15 million covers in the archive edition, and something like 5 million total items in the database. So anyway, you can pick that one up right now. You can download it as we're watching the show. But yes, that represents every dang last thing that we know about. So more to come, but hopefully a little bit of a relaxed pace. I don't know. We'll see. But that's what's going on in ComicBase land. All right, so back to everything. So over the weekend, there were actually two stories that made. I found out about them on our forums on our Slack here. It's caught up. Yes, that's a daunting task. Let's see here. ComicBase TVC law. I'm not sure I'm actually a Bills fan. Just moved to Dallas from Green Bay on Saturday. Well, I hope you enjoy Green Bay anyway. It's a lovely town. And get yourself some brats. That is the local delicacy. Let's see. What's the most number of covers added in a single week? Brian Stewart asks. I believe the number is. I think our all-time record is something like 19,000 in a week. We did not enjoy this whatsoever because I think it caused multiple server meltdowns for us at that point. We have a little more capacity now than we did back then, but that was absolutely psychotic. We were filling in, I think it was newspapers. I'm not sure, but it was whatever it was, we had a lot of them. But yeah, no, still 4,500, 5,000, pictures in a single week. That's a lot. I remember the good old days when we used to push 200, sometimes 300 new pictures in a week. Seems like that's been a long time ago. I don't know the last time we pushed less than 1,000 in a week. So yeah, we push a lot of content, and some of those pictures are always, they're actually upsizes of older ones. So we're always pushing to upgrade our library to full 4K. So if we have a bigger, better picture of something that had existed beforehand, we sometimes push that one out as well. So that is part of the new content that's coming out. All right, let's see here. Yeah, ComicBase Steve, was that the week that Marvel Star Wars #1 came out? No, it was not. All right, so getting on to things. So over this last weekend, I'll start with the one that didn't make our internal forums. There were two times when apparently AI came to the head and people decided, oh, clearly we need to call the police. And the first of them I'll talk about was up in FanCon up in, I want to say, Toronto. Let me get the story on that one if I can. Unfortunately, I did not have time to get my thoughts fully organized around this entire thing. So I'm going to be, here we are. I'm going to be pedaling around a little bit here. Let's see if I can get to the right screen. All right, there we go. So this is FanCon up in and apparently the folks up in at the show, there was Bell Canada. If you can see there in the background, they have a free photo booth. Oh, Fandom Pulse, why are you like this? Come on, come back. I do not want to subscribe, Fandom Pulse. Bring me back to my picture. Thank you very much. Okay, so if you see back here, there's a free photo booth that they were doing over here from Bell Canada. It did something a lot like this at Comic-Con. I believe it was put on by Kodak. And the idea was you could go in and get your picture taken, and just smile for the camera, and it would do a little anime version of you, just on the spot, do it using the kind of Chat GPT thing that we all have seen before. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Let me go and pull up my thing on it. So for instance, you could take any picture, including some very famous ones here, and just say, hey, give this to me in a Ghibli style, or give this to me in a whatever style, and it would do the thing for you. So Bill Canada thought, hey, this is a good angle for us. We'll go ahead and put this up. And that'll be a great way to get some fun and publicity, and tell people about, I don't know, talking to friends, something communicating. Anyway, Heather Antos, who is she's a personality in the world of comics. She is currently the licensing director over at IDW, where she is let's just be as nice as we can about this whole thing. Has achieved some notoriety for her handling of properties like My Little Pony and Star Trek and whatnot. which they've taken some interesting decisions as far as creative direction on the whole thing, involving, I don't know, former sex workers running the My Little Pony franchise, and racial casting, and sensitivity readers, and all sorts of other things like that. So not particularly successful as actually I don't know, producing content that people want to read so much, but she has gone from strength to strength in terms of having larger and larger roles from Marvel and then over at IDW in terms of being able to head up projects. So anyway, she was over at this FanCon, and she saw that they were having AI, and she says, "Oh my God, I can't believe this," and decided that she was going to get on her socials and see what she could do to get a protest going. So it was basically, "I cannot believe these people would do these things," and basically put out the word. Got I think 6-7 people, at least from the picture, going on there. And we just and by the way, it's we just want to know that the team supports creators. Just hate it. The sponsor, could be using generative AI in the same building as the artists. Yeah, it was a thing for her. Anyway, so lots of talking going back and forth, lots of swearing. Some fans assembled with signs that say things like AI, basically AI bad, and how dare you do this, and so forth. There was talk at some point of that if it got to be too much of a ruckus, they were going to kick people out, but they were like, no, but the people are rallying and they're not going to let that happen. So they've sent the police to give us a warning that if this gets too big, we'll be asked to disperse or be charged up to $5,000 for causing mischief. A few creators are staying behind to have a dialogue with the supervisors of the Bell Canada booth to try to talk it out. The convention supervisor, anyway, itself wanted to remove us, but many of the exhibitors and artists, Ali at Fan Expo, were unaware of this happening and advocated for us. So yes, so this nothing like a fun time at the comic convention with getting nice wacky pictures of yourself as an anime character. Nothing like having a ginned up protest arranged by a IDW editor on the fly. That's fun. So that's a thing that happened. Another thing that happened is, well, we get into the comments here in a second here because people are starting to go off. The other thing that happened this weekend, a little closer to home for most of us over here, is at Dragon Con over in, I believe, Atlanta. A artist by let me get the name on this right, Oriana Jerez, I believe, was kicked out at basically at police point because she was accused of selling AI generated artwork. So here's a picture of the booth. And the very, very balanced comments that were going around it, basically a warm, heartfelt goodbye to the AI artist who scammed, so many at this weekend, and they're showing her picture, of the booth, everything. There's all sorts of other, photos later on of people who've left nasty grams, at the booth afterwards, saying, kicked out for using AI, and basically so long loser, and etc. But basically the story that came up is other sellers were at her, were complaining because they looked at her booth and said, "Hey, this is AI generated. We don't approve of that. And isn't there a clause in the contract someplace that says you can't use AI?" And the Artist Alley contract does apparently it was a little bit hard to find on this whole thing, but we did find a very, very blurry screenshot, let's see if I can make this come up, of the Artist Alley contract for this one, which says basically, amongst the many, many things you can do here, and let's see if I can put this on the screen in a way that can be read at all. I apologize. This is a terrible, terrible screenshot. But to translate this slide, this goop here, no AR work of any kind will be allowed to be sold or distributed at the comic and pop artist, I believe it's Pop Artist Alley. Failure to comply with our AI policy can lead to immediate removal from the show floor. And that apparently was part of the long glop that they had to sign in order to get in there. So in a way, you could say, well, all right, if you looked at her booth, there were definitely some things that seemed to be at least digitally inspired. And they wanted her to go. She did not want to go. They called the cops on her, and they made her go. And then, basically, kind of a blue sky mob assembled and decided they were just going to kick the corpse all up, down, sideways, to the point where the artist is privated her Instagram and basically kind of crawled up into turtle position on the whole thing. I mean, it's as many people would when faced with just a crazed crowd assault of hatred on the whole thing. What she had going on until that moment was basically selling stuff that looks a lot like everybody else's stuff at the time, which is to say, if we look over at the booth, if you can kind of zoom in on that, well, it's a little hard to do, unfortunately, but a lot of Star Wars inspired type of things that have digital and paint effect type things on top of them, either analog or not. It's honestly, it's very mixed media looking. It's very, very common look. I don't know how else to put it other than we have seen this sort of thing before. Let me see if I can get. I had a window pre-staged with exactly what I wanted to say about this, and see if I can get to the right picture on it. This is the problem with tabs, gentlemen. Don't do it at home. Have I gotten my Photoshop? No, apparently not. Anyway, but someone had taken a similar picture from C2E2, where the entire show basically was looking over Artist Alley was people doing one set of licensed trademarks that they'd kind of interpreted in their own way, or done some painting on top of, or digitally descreened or rendered or posterized, etc. I mean, it was very little by way of like ultra original artwork to be seen throughout the entire convention. So I can't say that what this one artist was doing was unusual by any stack of the imagination. One thing that was get myself just on one camera. One thing that was definitely clear by the blue sky mob of things, most of which I can't put up on the show because they involve people swearing copiously, is she was more or less saying, hey guys, you guys complained because my sales were going and yours weren't, which would seem to be supported by evidence at the time that she was getting some action, they were not, so they called the cops on her. Now, to the extent that she signed for an agreement that that she broke by using AI, okay, that's again, that part is a non-story. But I think the more interesting aspect of this entire thing is that, let's face it, the use of AI as is right now, we are all being deeply, deeply dishonest about the entire thing. It's ridiculous, and I think maybe it's time that we have a more adult conversation about the whole thing, because honestly, I don't know about you, I don't have a lot of use for kind of ginned up outrage over something that everyone is doing, unless you can point to some kind of moral dimension that I'm missing. But it's the sort of thing where, like, I think we're lying to everyone. We lie, we lie to each other, but also I think we lie to ourselves about the use of technology and how much of it is there in terms of making the image and what we are doing, what we're getting paid for, and really how we're representing it. And honestly, I don't know about you guys. I have limited tolerance just for the nonsense. I understand you if you feel very strongly on one side or the other side of the whole thing, but striking like a really, really definite moral pose on this one, while at the same time, being kind of hypocritical to the whole thing, it's kind of off-putting. And I feel like instead of, pounding on each other's Twitter accounts or blue sky accounts and talking about how morally superior we are and how you just wish that other person would just die because they were, getting AI slop everywhere, when everything else that you're supporting is also of the same ilk, I don't think it's very productive. And so I'm kind of wondering if we can take this to a different level. So before we get into that one, let's see here. Heather, some love for Heather Antos over here. And someone says, if AI can write a better story than Tom King, I'm all in. But let's back it up a little bit here and talk about what's going on with AI and why is this a deal. And I'm also going to use this as an excuse to get rid of some tabs that I've had open here because they're driving me crazy. I don't know how anyone who has a million tabs open on their work environment functions at all, because I can't do it. So let me take, because I've more or less assembled some things that I want to show, and I want to dispose of them as I'm going here. And hopefully this will form itself into something like a coherent argument. So let's start with... let's start with a little bit of just, I want to show what it is that she's doing here. So probably the easiest way to do this is if I can just pull up Brave I had it. Come on, we can do it. Good grief. There we go. All right, I found the right tab. All right, so let's pop over this one. This over here is a picture that I had. This is one of those things where I passed the camera, set the shot up, chose the lens, passed the camera over to someone, and I said, "Hey, take a picture of me here. This is me. This is my profile picture, taken unfortunately a few years ago, because I'm now not quite as pulchritudinous as I once was, but same guy. But this is the profile picture I use for myself. This is taken at Loma Prieta Winery up in the Santa Cruz Hills, where I used to, go for, sun-dappled afternoons in the fall, just like today. So this was this picture of me. And so I just took this profile picture and I just said, draw this as a Peanuts character. And this is in Grok. It just took all of 2 seconds. And, and this is what it gave me. So if I take the same thing and I say, okay, draw it, let's see here. Let's go back to Grok, and there's my profile. And I say things like, draw this as a manga hero. All right, and Grok has some idea what a manga hero should look like. I don't know that I look anything like this, but let's see what it comes up with. My hair always gets amazing when done in manga. I've noticed that it's one thing. I can't make my hair do anything for real on camera, but as soon as I go manga, man, my hair is rocking. So there we are, and it got the shirt almost right. But yeah, no, I'm a studly dude as a manga dude, and this is the great crime that, by the way, that Bill Canada was doing, is they were taking pictures of people and doing the equivalent of saying, show this person is a manga person, and then they'd have a cute little profile picture they could give to themselves. Now, let's talk about how these things came to be, right? So, a lot of people talk about like, well, I don't like manga artwork. I don't like it. Or here, let me do the same thing again. Let's really annoy people. Let's say I want this in Studio Ghibli style. Here, let me find my picture again. Okay, so here's dropping my profile picture on, and I say, draw this in Studio Ghibli style, which I'm not sure. I feel like ChatGPT is specially optimized for this, but let's see how Grok does. And again, it's not like we're spending any time or a lot of effort on this one. We just kind of want to see what it comes up with. Now, what it's doing, and apparently I just get crazy when this looks. I like how I got the buildings behind me pretty well. I'm not sure about the facial structure there, but I'll take it. Yeah, close enough. All right, so that's me. And you can also have fun, draw yourself as The Simpsons or draw yourself as whatever. But what was it doing when it was doing all that? Well, it's using a process called Stable Diffusion. It's pretty involved, and I think I'll try to link an explainer into the idea of this whole thing to explain how the whole thing works. So what it's doing basically is it's doing both called forward and reverse diffusion, where it's looked at probably billions of pictures from across the interweb and everywhere you could ever look at a picture, and it's basically trying to figure out, well, how would I describe that picture? And it kind of tags things onto that, and then runs through a process where it turns those pictures into clouds of goo. It just it blurs them into gunk, and then with the prompt, I think it sits there and it does the reverse of that, and it says, well, okay, if I were starting from a cloud of gunk, how would I more or less reverse out the process and turn a random hunk of gunk into something that might, looked at along like 768 different language axes, resemble what the prompt is telling me to do, and even figure out what the prompt is telling you to do. There's a big process involved with that, and involves all sorts of neural networks and things like that. But it's basically trying to say, look, if I'm starting from just the general fuzzy idea of what does a Ghibli character have anything to do with, and I've looked at bajillions of pictures that were described as Ghibli-like, and so just like you might have, if you have a really good art background, or you've watched a lot of the Flintstones or things like that, you have a general idea for what a Flintstones character looks like. You'll sort of like, it's a little bit of a caricature of big jowly faces, and and pudgy, you kind of pudge everyone out a little bit. Draw with very simple line art style and so forth. But you have a general sense for that. Just like you and I know what we think clouds look like. We know what we think ducks look like, and so forth. So it is an idea for what's a Studio Ghibli character, kind of look like? What's a Peanuts character kind of look like? And then starting with any kind of reference information. In this case, I handed it a picture. Okay, if I were to encode that into the GUI, which is to say tokenize it, turn it into like what are the broad brushstrokes of what this picture is all about, and then once again interpret that in the form of a Ghibli thing. What might I come up with? And it's got a lot of it's randomizing certain things. It goes down certain paths and not others. And if you tried it 5 times in a row, you get 5 sort of different things, but they all have a kind of sort of general commonality between them. And amongst those things, you then could say, okay, I like that, but I feel like the one character looks a little too old, a little too jolly. What else? Can you straighten that a little bit? Can you move that down, and so forth? Or you might take the picture and say, all right, well, I like that. I like what you did with the background and everything, but I'm going to touch out the face. I'm going to replace that with a different iteration from something else. I'm maybe going to paint it in myself. I'll do something else. Maybe I'll give you a different reference picture to start with at the start. It was like a picture of me in a tuxedo so I look, where I'm posed just right, and gives you a better sense for where I'm going with the whole thing. The point is, you're probably, for any kind of final piece, you're going to work at it. You're not just going to take the first thing that came out of there, unless you're just doing something goofy like a game avatar where you don't really care. It's just, okay, haha, that's good, good for a laugh, we'll take it. But if you're doing any kind of artwork for real using any of these tools, you're going to start with a concept of what you want done, and you might, say things like, I want to have a superhero flying a futuristic jetpack, firing a laser beam at a space, a star destroyer while out in space, with the sun, position, with a star, positioned in the upper right-hand corner. I mean, whatever you want. You might, and again, there's a whole sense for what these prompts should look like. There's a whole art to how those things go. By the way, one thing that you might want to really look at, if I can reach back at it here. This is Midjourney magazine, which actually costs like $3 to get it. And what it is it's all the artists who use the tool Midjourney, which is an amazing, generator of great images, far more sophisticated than Grok. And what they're doing is they say, okay, all right, here's some of the most interesting images that have gone through the servers this month. And, however you do it, they range from the abstract to, photorealistic to conceptual to art to advertising. I mean, this one, this is like, this looks like high-end product design. But it goes all over the board, and it tells you, and here are the particular parameters they use to generate this image, and here's the kind of prompts they were using to get there, and so forth. But I mean, if you look at this one thing, if I hadn't said that this was anything to do with AI, all you would think of is that this thing is a high-end magazine talking about really great-looking imagery. I mean, let's just be honest about it. That's how anyone would interpret this. This is a high-end art catalog of really good images. It's only the part where you say afterwards, this is AI, that you kind of become a little bit sus about it. It's like, well, what do you mean AI? But I mean, just judged on the image quality itself. I mean, if you just say, is that a strong image? Is that good looking? Is that an effective way to communicate the idea? If we're being honest with ourselves at all, you sit there and say, that is a freaking great image, and so forth. Now, there's a couple of things I want to kind of get clear from the start. One is, again, if we're just being honest with ourselves, we got to give up cred to the quality of the image. I mean, it's not all people with 6 fingers and weird elbows and things like that. And I mean, a lot of the stuff, yes, you can get things like that from AI image generators, but the stuff that people are staying with, that they're keeping, doesn't have that kind of nonsense in it. It's the okay boomer of people want to put down AI, as they call it, AI slop. It's just that glop that you had, AI do, which, let's face it, if I had taken the first thing that came off my screen and said, oh yeah, this is my new creation, this is my art picture, yeah, okay, fair enough, I could call this AI slop. But realistically, if I was going to go and sell this image in anything, it didn't stay at the first shot that I did off of Midjourney. It isn't like I didn't work it 15 different times for 3.5 hours using other tools, using hand editing, using compositing, whatever else. That's the reality of how you actually come up with imagery like this. Things like tools like Kling or Midjourney or ChatGPT or any of the others. Excellent for ideation, excellent for getting you interesting places that you didn't know. And honestly, for things like thumbnails, when you guys look at like the thumbnails we will do for conceptual pieces, like, or even just like the ones who's saying like, we're not having a live stream today, I'd be like, okay, yeah, hey, I'll call up, my art guy and say, hey, Mark, just tell him Pete's working down the lab today. Just something with like a guy, a scientist with like lots of sparks coming out there, and just, put together the thing. And he, in 20 minutes, will come up with a bitchin' looking graphic of some mad scientist down in the lab with sparks, and that'll be the thing that goes up on our website that says, sorry, no live stream today because Pete's busy working. There is absolutely a role for that kind of, just do it fast, get it done work. And there's also a role for the, no, I'm going to sweat this thing. But when it's all said and done, at the end of the day, we are at a stage now. I mean, we weren't 2 years ago, but we are now at a stage where you can't reliably tell it's AI versus the work of a very, very good artist. And honestly, the people who are competitive in the world of AI they're not, again, they're working for what they get, either through their art direction or through their final editing, to the compositing that they do on top of the original ideas and so forth. So it is a creative process. I mean, you're kidding yourself if you think it isn't. You're not. You're not being honest about the situation. Now, I'm going to do something unusual here. I'm going to hide the background here, and you might have seen this is just the background on a big Fallout. This is one of the Rangers from Fallout New Vegas. This is video game art. It's art inspired by the video game, because this isn't lifted directly from the video game itself. This is a digital artist had gone and made a background image, which just looks bitchin', so I use it, of one of the New California Rangers. And, it has lots of wonderful details I love. It has the insert tab A, slot B kind of things in the mask. It has the bullet hole in the jacket and things like that. Fantastic image. And the sort of imagery I would have on my desktop before this was all things like other Fallout, art, because it's favorite video game, right? So, but there would be things like artist concepts of one of the Brotherhood of Steel Knights standing over the ruined Washington, D.C. skyline, things like that. And again, it's not a game grab. It's not like they just got to a really bitchin' point in the game and just hit screenshot and they were done. No, it was the digital artist sitting out there with their Wacom tablet who took elements from the game and then said, all right, now let's paint this in this kind of way. Let's do this kind of thing. And they would spend hour upon hour upon hour upon hour and come up with this amazing landscape. Now, that's great. And honestly, to find someone with that level of talent, we hire top artists from around the world once a year to do the ComicBase cover. It's a pretty big commission, and so as a result, we can get and pretty much anyone we want. There's only 1 or 2 people that we've not been able to throw a sufficient amount of money at them to get their interest on it. But yeah, no. So we spend for our covers. As a result of that, I'm always on the look for talented artists who might be able to do the next set of covers. So for many, many years when we started out, when we very first started, ComicBase 1.0, we used a guy who had just gotten done drawing covers for superheroes for Malibu Comics. If you remember that one, a guy named Scott Benefield did the ComicBase 1.0 cover. Later on, though, it's like, again, ComicBase is starting to get established. We started thinking, well, what looks even better than a top level artist who works in comic books, and I needed him to do his own hero, essentially invent a hero for us, because I couldn't count on getting a license to Batman or a license to Spider-Man to put on our covers, because that would involve me talking to Marvel's trademarking organization. It had to be something we could own in terms of what was being drawn. So in terms of being able to scale up the perceived value of the artwork, I thought, well, what's better? And so you look your eye out, and the thing that caught my eye was a series of covers that I saw done for Fantasy and Science Fiction magazine, done by a guy named Kent Bash. These beautiful painted covers of dragons and things like that. And I thought, well, that would be terrific. How about a painted cover? And so a big fan of like Kent Williams and other artists today who are making a splash with, painted on canvas covers of things like that. And so we threw the commission to Kent Bash, and he did a couple of actually kind of very strange covers for us. I mean, they're kind of wonderful in their own way, but I'll admit I got them in, and I was like, oh, okay, didn't see this one coming. So if you look at the covers of ComicBase 4 and 5, I remember getting, after you pay all your money and you commission a cover like this one, you maybe get a sketch ahead of time, and after that he paints the picture, and then he sends you a photo of the picture. It's a negative, color negative on film, which you then scan in, and that became like our booth art and the cover art and things like that. I actually never got to see the original canvases for those ones, because I asked him, well, the thing I'm buying from you is actually the first usage rights of the image, so that's great. Now I would love to have the canvas to hang up. How much would you charge for that? And he named a number, and it had so many digits in it that I was like, that's not going to happen in my life. But okay, but if you look at go back in time and look at the ComicBase 4 and 5 covers, you can imagine where like I might have done like a bit of a double take when I saw those ones, but at the same time, I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. We'll run with this one. But I'll admit, I was a little bit not satisfied with where it was going. I mean, it had definitely a high end look to it, but it was a little odd. And I would love to have had a little bit more control over that one. So I thought, well, the answer is I will find, I will go and look at every piece of art I've ever seen in the world of comic books, and I will just find the guy who's doing the best stuff of anything that has ever existed. Because Alex Ross was not really in full effect right then, the guy who really popped out for me was a guy named Glenn Orbick. Actually, I didn't even know his first name originally. I just knew him because he signs as Orbick, and he'd done a series of pulp covers for DC that were absolutely fantastic. And I was able to look around, and one day we're packing up the booth at Comic-Con, and you're just kind of watching everyone's name tags as they're filing out, and every time you see a pro badge, you kind of wonder who it is. And I saw some guy go by there, and his name tag said Orbick. I'm like, are you Orbick? And I didn't even know who Glenn Orbick's first name was at the time. And he goes, I guess I am. And I said, are you the guy who painted all the amazing pulp covers and everything? Because I have to talk to you. And so anyway, so that turned into a long running relationship with Glenn Orbick. Fantastic painter, fantastic figure work guy, amazing illustrator, who did about a dozen covers for us. And at this point, because I don't know, he's flattered, or he's just a reasonable guy, or a different model for pricing his art, I actually could afford to own the original canvases, which is fantastic because they're all around my house right now, and I adore these. They are they're like the trophies when we do a version every year. Is that I can come up, the way I would do is I would come up with a concept for in rough terms for like, well, we're doing an action adventure cover, and Glenn would say something like, well, how about something like kind of an Indiana Jones thing, exploring a tomb? I was like, right, you clearly got it, go off and do it. And he would, along with his partner, Laurel Bleckman, would go and have great amounts of fun hiring their stunt buddies, because they worked down in Hollywood, and they knew all sorts of people who'd done character acting and stunt work and everything in the films, and they would basically set the scene, photograph them in costume. They would do it in sepia tone, actually, because apparently it was easier for him to get the colors right and everything else if he had that even contrast level to work with. He'd arrange them on his artboard, and then these amazing scenes would take place, and you could see from ComicBase 6 onward to I think 17 or 18, these amazing Glenn Orbit covers, and it's just fantastic stuff. And the high point of my entire year was always the day, it was usually right when we were about to ship, where this heavily wrapped package would arrive in the mail, and I would carefully open it up with this 97 levels of bubble wrap and everything else, and I would actually see the original canvas for the first time, which then I would hand over to my art guy, and we would painfully color correct the negative, which would shot, which back in the days of poor color calibration always needed about 1 million tons of calibration in order to make it so that that purple that he painted was exactly the one that actually would appear on your screen and on your print. So anyway, good times, and it really was. And unfortunately, Glenn contracted a disease, died. And it was terrible. I had to find a new artist, which we did. Again, wonderful. Lee Moyer, fantastic job on that one. And then later on, after she had gone through some stuff, we managed to get Laurel Bleckman in for a couple of covers, and Laurel was absolutely terrific. I mean, I think some of the covers she did for us are some of the best we've ever seen, and she was great because she was so close, both in heart and skill, to Glenn. They literally would finish each other's paintings. It was sort of an unknown secret amongst them, as if one was running behind the other's brushstrokes would often complete the job. But they worked on everything. Again, it's like when you see the earliest covers of ComicBase, there's like a mummy hand, lurching into view, and I ran to Laurel at one point. He's like, "That's me." It's like, which one? Is like the mummy hand, because she dragged herself in there. So this is art. This is great stuff. But what are we really buying when we're buying art? And the answer is we're buying a strong image, right? So the answer when we're buying ComicBase art, and again, we're willing to throw whatever money we got to throw at it in order to get the image we want. What it really comes down to is I always kind of gave the instruction to the artist. Look, I'm looking for the second of a 3-frame panel, right? Which is of a 3 panel layout, which is basically the idea is that I'm looking at the middle scene before the ending comes, and where something clearly had gone before in order to set up the scene, and so it poses a little puzzle in the reader's mind or the viewer's mind of what exactly got me here, what's going on with all this. And so those were, I thought, the pictures that worked the best were the ones that kind of left you with that little hidden mystery of the whole thing. Why is that dirigible hanging over the scene, over the city, with these two people clearly making a getaway from something? What's going on with that? Why is the assassin sneaking up behind the person with the dagger, who's clearly on the lookout for them, well, dressed up as a noir detective. It's just you want to have something in your head that kind of teases you, and that's, I think, what makes it for a great cover illustration. But at the end of the day, what am I buying? I'm buying a strong image, and so when it came time to do other things, and I'd had this idea for an image that I'd had in my head forever, which is I want to have, and again, I've been collecting business cards for folks forever of anyone who worked with photo painting, which was sort of a new field that came up, of the idea of that you take a photo and you digitally paint over it. And so you get this art, this magic between art and digital imagery, because there's certain things very hard to paint photorealistically. But at the same time, you oftentimes wants that fantasy element that only painting or digital imagery can give you. So you want to have that sense of you're kind of in that dream world of things. But anyway, I looked at a number of people who were big on the national scene and these sorts of things, and we got to the point where, like, okay, I for the next image, and we had some deliverability issues. We're getting, because it's very difficult getting onto some people's schedules in terms of the art. And one thing that when I'm shipping is I can't run behind. I can't be waiting forever for art. You notice that we did ship a couple versions where, like, it went out with a sketch cover, and we try to make it like that's a good thing, because, like, hey, you got the limited edition cover. The real answer behind most of that was the artist is still busy waiting for the paint to dry because we were pushing the deadline that far, and that gets a little old. And so when it came time to do the version a couple runs ago, we kind of went back to the idea of, like, okay, I want to have the idea of like a beautiful avenging angel with a sword, and just absolutely surreal imagery. And how do we get that? And kind of went through my business cards and the whole thing, and you think about where can we set up the photo shoot? We have to find a surreally beautiful model, and then we have to take the idea of, okay, so, take just a model who's just amazing to start with, do all the makeup, do all the hair, do all the costuming, set up the photo shoot, get it lit, get the fog machine in there to get that going, get the prop in there for the whole thing. And you're trying to think of how the entire thing goes to even get the base picture that you're going to paint on top of. And my head's just screaming at me at this point, just thinking this is going to be a nightmare. I mean, it'll be really cool, but it's going to take like a month to engineer this, even if I'm not the one involved with the actual physical production, just to get all the pieces to come together. And at that point, we kind of had a run-in with the idea that Midjourney, which is the tool that had been doing really kind of laughably awful covers up until that point, had started getting kind of good. And we had seen an artist friend of ours, who's actually a writer, but also artist, again, friend in the sense of, like, I know her work a lot, but she barely knows that we exist. But we'd seen what she had been doing with her covers, and she, if you look back about 100 shows, we went into the genesis of where all this about. Her covers, I gotta admit, were absolutely terrible. But because she was an independent artist, she was going to go and try to find the the best image she could to sell her books. I mean, she's an independent author, and so because she couldn't afford to hire real artists, or the artists she could afford to hire were not particularly good, she was getting some covers where I think we're all kind of looking at her saying, God, I hope this book's better than the cover looks. But it was kind of rough. But then all of a sudden, after dozens of books, and I read her column basically every morning. It's rambling and yet kind of wonderful. You sit there and say, well, I hope she's a better, writer than she is an artist, because this art is terrible. And then all of a sudden one day her covers got good. And it's like, what happened here? And so I started listening to more of what she was writing about how her covers had gotten good. And it involves everything we talked about beforehand, where you start with Midjourney, and then you spend about 17 million years going through iteration after variation, after reconcept, after reprompt, after everything. And then you start painting on top of it, and you start doing the other things with it. And then you composite a few things together, and you do what else? You build up the illustration you finally want, and then that becomes your book. And I thought, wow, something like that might work for us. At the very least, we could give it a shot. And so what we had, though, is we had a problem on our hands. And this, by the way, is the secret origin story of something called Synthetica, which is to say, we thought, well, okay, we got a problem here, because I'm seeing some AI art base now that I look at and say, this is just objectively really good. But we have a problem that as soon as people hear it's AI, they don't like it. Because if it's blind and you just look at it, hey, great image. But if you sit there and say, I used an AI to make it, then suddenly it's like, I hate it. It's the worst thing ever. I can't believe how could you do that? And it's like, well, that's kind of weird, but at the same time, I got to make an image. So what do we do with this? And so what we wound up doing is, and it's also funny because as a concept, we didn't want it to be like an AI concept. I wasn't looking for something that looked computery. I wasn't looking for something that looked, futuristic. I was looking at AI as a tool to get me to an image I wanted. So what I wanted the image at the end of the day, and I was going to use any damn tool in the toolbox to get there. So in other words, so we're going to start with bits of things, and then we're going to paint on top of them. We're going to do what we would have been doing with my photo camera in order to get an initial image of it, and then we're going to build elements on top of it using either traditional media, digital painting, whatever else, but using all the artist tools that I know how to do, and all the people I know how to throw at it. I thought, well, what we'll do is we'll create a studio, and we'll call it Synthetica, because I kind of want to give a nod to the idea that there is an artificial element to this. So I'm not going to call it like Bob's Studio, or in this case, really the model of it was Krusty Bunkers. If you guys know that one, it was Neil Adams' studio of when he, if he had put his own name on something and said, this is Neil Adams, they would expect it to be Neil Adams doing all the work. No, he wasn't going to do that. What he was going to do, on the other hand, is use his sense of art direction and his sense of commercial art, all the things he'd learned as out of a lifetime of being able to do good art and compose powerful things. And he was going to direct other people on how to do that. And they were going to live somewhat anonymously. I mean, they'd be people he knows, just like the people in Synthetica are people I know. But the rule for us was going to be, you can use any tool in the toolbox at all. We don't care how you get there. Just get us the image that is the best. And what you wind up doing in the end of the day is you wind up, again, hiring sometimes multiple people, but using, again, bits of this, bits of that, compositing that thing on top of it, fixing up the twinkle of the eye, doing the thing. And so it is a complicated situation. But at the end of the day, when you look at it, you sit there and say, that's a damn good image. And if I look at the covers for ComicBase 24 and 25, those are damn good images. So those are the ones we did with the studio that we call Synthetica. And that's a separate brand than we're doing with Metropolis for the ones where, we call it just like the art department, which is just like me and Mark just saying, let's play with Midjourney some and do a little bit of touch up on our own and just kind of knocks a few things out that seem like fun to us. That's different. That's the whole thing. But what we're doing for the next version of ComicBase on the whole thing is we actually have a couple different covers coming out. We have one by Bill Robinson, a fantastic Disney artist I met forever ago. And we have another one, which we did with our own in-house studio, Synthetica, which is a cover we're calling, Eve 2.0, which is basically it's kind of a futuristic take on the Metropolis robot from this whole thing. And I think at the end of the day, what we'll do is we'll do some blind testing. I mean, at this point, I'm kind of giving away the game on some of it, but I'm basically going to say, look, here are all the images that we were considering for the whole thing. And I think we're going to let everyone else decide which ones do you like. So where does that have me on deciding on, what's the virtue of art, of digital art on the whole thing? Look, clearly I'm a fan. I like it because I'm a little guy trying to do amazing things. And so just like, we talked a while back on one of the other live streams, I kind of ruined someone's, there was a PhD who was holding a ethical AI panel, and they were going to talk to a bunch of independent filmmakers about like, well, now that we have things that can generate video, how would you use this in an ethical way? And the answer amongst all the small filmmakers was any damn way I can, because I got a movie to make. It's like, we weren't going to worry about tying our hands behind our back because they're tied enough by lack of money, lack of time, lack of schedule. We are going to use every rotten, mean trick in the book to get the most amazing visuals we can on film, because that's what we get paid for. We get paid to create the best product. And so, yeah, once someone actually said it out loud, everyone at the rest of the table could be like, yeah, that's kind of how we're going to do it. Up until that time, people were kind of halfway intimidated into the, aren't I supposed to not say that I'm ever going to do this and pretend that I don't like this? But we all knew under the belt we were all going to do it. And because the truth of the matter was, and this the argument I made to try to persuade the people at my table, it's like, come on, can we just admit what we're already doing? Was that we are already using digital tools all day long, whether we admit it or not. I mean, I'm a photographer, so this is my baby, right? I mean, I've taken tens of thousands of exposures with this. This is my Canon 5D Mark IV, Mark III. But did I take the picture? I mean, I'll tell you, I didn't. I've taken amazing shots. I know about lenses. I know about lighting. I know about the rest of it. I know how to, do the mechanics of getting the physical shot in there. I know, I know the skills. But at the same time, do I shoot with autofocus turned off? Not usually. I mean, there are times when I will, but I mean, I guaranteed if I'm shooting anything that's moving very fast, you're damn right. Every single person who's photographing the NFL, all those photographies you see out there with their $10,000 500 millimeter lenses, every damn one of those has autofocus turned on. None of them have time to artfully frame up the shot and manually adjust balance. No, they need their camera to handle that thing for them, because they've got a quarter of a second to catch that amazing reception. And so, we are always, I mean, this thing in here, one of the problems with cameras these days is you have to fit basically an image processing computer into this whole thing and have it not overheat as you're shooting 4 and sometimes 8K video on these things. And you're running, would have been a mainframe back in the day, but you're running something in the size of, it's like 1 by 2 inches is all you've got in order to make all this happen. But it's doing amazing amounts of image calculations, face recognition, image stabilization. It's done both mechanically as well as digitally. It's doing all sorts of computations around, exposure and ISO and everything. And it doesn't in the blink of an eye. everything we do, I don't care what profession you're in these days, U.S. Army snipers, are relying on ballistic calculators these days. I mean, back in in Vietnam, all the people who were absolute legends of the field would make, shots from a mile and a half out, and it would be astonishing. I mean, absolutely, epitomes of human endeavor, but they're getting bested by the fact that you are throwing computers into essentially their scopes now. So they can monitor the wind calculations, they can figure out the bullet drop and everything else, and hit shots that are even better than the best of the best ever could have done 30, 40 years ago. It's just we're becoming a superhuman society on that level. None of us are, I make the, when people talk about like, well, shouldn't you just reject AI? I say, well, look, we are all very proud. We're all on team human. We are all humans after all. I mean, we're both trying to serve humans, but we're also humans ourselves. But the problem is we can never get anywhere rejecting the tech. I mean, think about it. It's like if I work at a lumber mill, and let's go back to like a John Henry type of story. So my job is cutting boards at the local, lumber mill, and I've been doing this all day long. I'm enormously proud of my physical skill. I'm at my prime. My arms are like iron. They're like iron's tree trunks, and I could saw 50 huge timbers a day, just with my giant legendary iron arms. That is absolutely the stuff of American history and legend, and I will lose in 20 minutes straight the second that somebody shows up with a circular saw. I mean, there are things that happen that just you can't undo them, and you're a fool to work against them. I mean, you're just it's beyond spitting into the wind. It's beyond cursing at the tide. So there's an image over here of a guy, and props to the first guy who can name it. This is actually a fictional character. I did not know this. I actually thought it was a real guy. But if anyone can get this one in the chat, but anyone. Someone impress me. No, no one yet. All right, so let me just refresh one more time. No, not yet. No, so the person here, this is a legendary figure called Ned Ludd. You guys might know him as the legendary head of the Luddites. The idea is that Ned Ludd, and Ned Ludd is a character, really, he doesn't exist, but he's kind of like the he's kind of like the figure out of Atlas Shrugged. But the idea is that he's a person who, when the machines were coming in and all the weavers were going to be put out of work or forced into factories, he smashed the looms and led the rebellion. And on the other hand, real rebellions were made on the back of the idea of Ned Ludd, or the idea of that, but just on the idea of like, we don't like as humans being outclassed, and you can sense that you're being outclassed. I mean, one problem we've got is that you spend a lifetime learning a skill, and what do you do the day when you look at a machine, something inhuman, something that doesn't think, that objectively is better than you on a lot of what you pride yourself on? I mean, I could be, the speed of my stitchery, the skill of how fast I change the shuttle, everything else like that. There comes a day when stuff like that, when a machine comes out and just crushes you. It's like I talk about like sawing boards at the local lumber mill. And I think the foolish thing to do is, there's a number of foolish things you can do. One of them is you can just spit at the machine and try to break the machine. Because let's face it, what you're doing is you're spitting at the face of everyone who looks at the end result and says, wait a minute, so if I have you make me a shirt, it's going to cost me a week's wages because you spent a week sewing that shirt or weaving that shirt. Whereas if I have the machine make the shirt, it costs me an afternoon's wages. I love you, Ned, but I got to do what I got to do, because that's how you actually make a richer society. At a certain point, the value proposition just becomes absolutely overwhelming. I have any number of things that I'm really bloody good at physically. Whether it was when I'm woodworking, about how straight I can saw a line, or how involved my jigsaw cutting can be, and things like that. That as soon as I were talking about competing against someone who makes furniture for a living, on the other hand, like at scale, forget about it, because as soon as it's economical for them to hire, basically pay for the machine, that machine's going to outcompete me every day of the week in those areas. Now, the things I can do that will outcompete the machine, that's where you wind up shifting your field of battle to, is, can I be more creative than the machine? Can I come up with a more interesting design than the guy who's just knocking out a copy of last year's thing, and so forth? One thing I was joking about before at the show was the idea of like you look at my dog versus the squirrels. Dodger, he's a Bernese Mountain Dog. He comes on, he's fast. He's like a barreling train as he comes after the local squirrels. He has never caught one quite yet, even though on the straightaway he is. You see him catch up on him. I've seen one of them actually run from between his teeth as he's clamping down on them. He's caught fur, but he's never actually caught the squirrel, because what will happen is the squirrels figure out I'm not faster than him. I can be cleverer than him. I can get up trees. He can't climb the trees. They got that go for him. But if he catches me out in the open, the only thing they can do to get away from Dodger is they can jink, because the one thing he can't do is switch direction very quickly. And same thing goes, like we all have things that we're great at and things that we're not great at. I mean, there's a reason that receivers and running and linemen are different players in the NFL. One of them can like bulldoze you like like you're a small animal, like Dodger barreling down a squirrel, and the other one hopefully can twist and turn and get away from you before you can crush him. Yeah, that's kind of like the way you compete. So we're faced. And I have great sympathy to everyone at this point in time. We're faced continually at this point where we have superhuman stuff coming for our jobs, and this is weird. I mean, I remember the day it came from my job. I spend a great deal of time being very proud of being a coder, being an interesting guy, having a lot of interesting ways to construct software and things like that. But I have not had time, nor will I ever have time as a human being, to read every tech note that Microsoft will ever put out about every technology that might ever become relevant to my job and fully understand all the implications of it as applies to all the things that I will be working on in the next 10 years. The computer has, the AI has, so they can. When it comes time to show up with some coding feature that has just come out that I've never heard about, or that I've been working in a different area, but it had an application across something I knew, I got unsurprised very quickly when AI would suggest answers to coding problems that I'd had for a very long time, where it said, well, how about if you just do it like this? And I'd be like, what the hell is that? Because I'd literally never heard of the technique before, despite working in that field every day of my life and doing enormous amounts of reading and doing enormous amounts of reading, journaling, and all the other things. I mean, all the things you try to keep up with your field. At a certain point, you can't compete with the force of a mainframe when it comes time to memorize things. It's not going to be where the human wins. Similarly, you might have spent your entire life figuring out all the tricks of being a useful commercial artist, figuring out how this is how light would shine upon fur to make it look like fur, or how to draw glass. One of the hardest things to do in cartoons is how do you show a transparent surface. There's certain idioms that you learn to communicate that sort of idea, but there will come a time when it comes to the technical aspects of laying out the scene where something that has had a chance to read and interpret and incorporate 1.5 billion images, and it doesn't store the image, but it stores the sense of the image. And so again, AI is not really it's not copying Alex Ross, but it copies the idea that, well, okay, if I want to paint in Alex Rossi style, what we're really talking about is a certain level of photorealism. It's not exactly photorealistic, but it's pretty close to, with a certain type of lighting, with a certain kind of color palette. It's not, again, it has a sense of who Alex Ross is, but it got that just by looking at a lot of his stuff. It's not regurgitating his stuff, so it didn't really steal it. And that's why when people are taking AI and they're suing them for copyright, that's why they're not winning, because all they did is they looked at the stuff. But if they were to look at the what's stored in memory of the computer, what you got was fragments and senses of things. You didn't get the thing itself. You can't ask AI to cough up a copy of the Martian Chronicle. It doesn't have it. It has lots of things that feel very Bradbury-esque, though, in its memory. It certainly knows what a Bradbury turn of phrase is, or a William Blake turn of phrase, or James Joyce turn of phrase. It definitely knows what that person feels like, because it's read it all. And so it's one of those things where, we are humans competing in a world of superhuman ability at this point. And so I think what we have to do is we have to say, well, all right, so what do I bring to the table now that it's stolen the thing that I spent my lifetime perfecting as a craft? And so here's the part where I sit there, I'm trying to argue the human part of this one. Look, we get paid as humans for delivering excellence. the customer doesn't care how we got there. Not really. We're sympathetic to other humans who worked very hard. I mean, if I have a choice between buying, the table that was handcrafted by our Amish carpenters and the table that's the same price made by a highly, mechanized machine shop, well, if it was the same price, sure, I'll throw the business to the Amish guy just on sentimentality alone. But if the one that, the Amish guy knocked out has got the sort of normal human amount of errors and wobbles and things like that in it, and if it came at twice the price or 3 times or 5 times the price of the one that was made without the highly automated jigs and things like that, let's face it, what people are going to buy. There'll be, the Amish guy's mom will buy the one from the Amish guy, and then she'll try to get out enough glue and everything else to fix it up. Everyone else is going to IKEA and buying the machine shop made one. And the same thing goes for strong imagery. We have great deal of sentimentality. We love the idea of being on Team Human for this whole thing, and we do cheer for the human, because again, we're humans ourselves. We want to cheer for the human, but what we really want is we want the work. We want the best possible output. So, I mean, you might love that, coders right now, or this is like people used to say, learn to code. The coders are losing jobs right, left, and center because coders who work with AI in their toolbox are just monumentally more effective than coders who don't use AI. Now, you could be just again, John Henry and the steam shovel. You could be a really good guy who really knows how to knock out code and you have lifetime experience to do that thing. But the guy who John Henry's work ethic, who also has the ability to drive the steam shovel, is he'll have paved the entire place. I mean, he'll laid out 10 times the track you ever did, and he won't be dead at the end of the day. And that's honestly, that's the only way we're going to get through this next phase as AI comes around. So it's one of these weird ones. I think what we're doing right now is we have the normal proportion of, we have humans that, again, we're all on Team Human, faced with a technological change like we've never seen before, because there have been things that have come in individual industries that have taken apart that industry. When movable type came around, it destroyed the whole idea of ancient centuries and centuries of people hand illuminating and copying manuscripts. That just went away. Same thing went for all the craftsmanship that went into making a fine carriage. That over the course of 20-30 years, that just went away when the motor car came out. But we've never seen anything that I can think of. Maybe the personal computer comes close, that's affected so many things across so many disciplines the way AI has. We've already got, as is right now, according to the estimates of people that they think they can tell, 86% of college students are using AI. 56% have used it on assignments, again, that are willing to admit it. 94% of AI writing is undetected by teachers, according to Forbes. This tells me what we've really got is we've got a transformational technology, no pun intended. By the way, the T in Chat GPT stands for transformer. But no, we've got technology that is so unbelievably useful, and it's such an unbelievable savings in terms of what it does, that very, very few people are not using it. You can be very opposed to it. You can say very true things about it. You can say things like, look, your reasoning skill that you've got will go to hell. Just like my ability to multiply 3- and 4-digit numbers in my head went to hell after I got a calculator. I'll admit it has suffered. The ability to just go to AI and have it crank out certain things, it kind of leaves your head in that little fuzzy lazy zone a little bit longer than it would otherwise be before you kind of sharpen up and get down to business. If you can just say, I'll check the problem over to AI and see if it just gives me the answer before I have to start breaking down the hard part myself. And I can definitely see over a long period of time how that would have a real serious dumbing down effect on humanity. We definitely have, with the internet came around, the ability to memorize facts became completely devalued in education. So we now have a large, cohort of people right now where if you bring up any subject whatsoever that involves history, they probably have never heard of it, and they probably could never marshal what the context is on any kind of conceptual basis the way that an educated conversation of 30, 40 years could have. You would have taken quite, just for granted that people would have known things like, who were the popes, or who were the Carthaginians, or, what was the Battle of Shiloh about? Or, just there's a whole, corpus of facts that educated people were just supposed to know, that people just don't know now, and they don't think it's worth knowing because they could just look it up. So, I mean, I do think that this is going to have some corrosive effects on us. At the same time, I think that people are going to do very, very, very well with AI. And here I have some sympathy for the creator who got kicked out of DragonCon, where she's basically saying, look, if you saw my sales, you know why I'm laughing at you. Now, granted, I think this is probably her, being pissed off that she'd set up a table in Atlanta far from home and gotten kicked out, and, other people on the artists were jeering at her. But I don't think people jeering at her were entirely in the right. I think to the extent that she said, this thing was painted entirely by me, well, maybe they might have a case there. Did she break some kind of clause in her contract about being there? Probably. Was that a fair clause? Probably not. But, I'm willing to say fair cop on that one. But I think the people missing the point, I mean, the Luddites of today, are the people who are jeering at her as they kicked her out the door. Because at the end of the day, if she makes stronger imagery, if she's better at it than they are, it's going to be weird, because number one, she'll be selling more because she's making things people want to buy. And eventually the same people jeering at her will, under the covers, often be the ones who are doing it themselves on their own stuff and just not telling people about it. So, I mean, it is one of these weird problems we've got right now, is that we're incredibly dishonest about exactly how much of the process we were really doing ourselves. I'm going to close out with just one of my favorite stories of this whole issue, because again, it is a complicated issue, and there's a lot to be said on all sides of it. But a guy named Giotto di Bondoni, he went by Giotto popularly. There's no surviving picture of him. There's, if you look on Wikipedia for Giotti, you'll see a picture which is fancifully painted, they say. Basically, they took a description, and some other guy who'd never seen him 30, 40 years later painted a picture of like, he might look like this, and he's kind of made up something. So that's the picture that survives of him. That's hilarious. Anyway, Pope Benedict the 11th was throwing out the commission for the St. Peter's Basilica, and Giotto wanted the commission, and so Pope Benedict sent a courier and said, well, send us samples, send us a reference. It's a big commission, and so what Giotto did, and this is consummate human skill, is he took his hand, and using it in perfect form, like his hand was a compass, he went like this and drew a perfect circle, sent it on a piece of paper back with the courier, and the courier said, yeah, he drew this freehand, it was a perfect circle. And Giotto was like, Giotto got the commission. What more can you say about that? Anyway, years later, and this is be my closing story on this one. Let me put this one up on the other screen here. Years later, Steve Jobs got invited as a guest to Sean Lennon's birthday party. Sean Lennon, the son of John and Yoko, God help us all. And he had just introduced the Macintosh, and he decided, well, hey, Sean, want to open your present? And he basically opened up the Mac, and in front of all the cognoscenti of the time, decided that he was going to go and show off the new toy. And of course, he'd given it to Sean, but of course, it was really there to have all the cool people see what the cool new thing was going to be. And this setting the perfect storm for this is basically Steve Jobs' life in a nutshell. And anyway, so, Sean played with it for a little while. He's like, oh, here's how you use a mouse. No one had ever seen a mouse before. And he drew a thingy, right? And then Andy Warhol's there. And he goes, hey, look at this. Plays with the thing for a while, is waving in the air. He doesn't know how to do it. But eventually gets to the point where like, hey, I drew a circle. He's got Mac Paint out. It's like, look, Keith, I drew a circle. And it blew him away. Later on, they show him using... this is not the Macintosh because it only came in black and white at the time. He's got a picture of Debbie Harry over here, Debbie Harry from Blondie. And you could tell that they had the ability to take a picture. He had the ability to scan it in. He didn't. They show in the caption this is him drawing on an Amiga computer, but clearly he did not draw that picture of Debbie Harry. That started out as a photograph of Debbie Harry, which is scanned in, and then this is Andy Warhol using the Amiga and different tools to touch it up and to make it Andy Warhol-esque. I think there's a picture of it down at the end here. There's a picture of Andy Warhol, and you remember all these really glitchy-looking patterns that they had on the paint palettes. If you're old enough to remember all that one, you basically start with a picture of the guy, you glitch it up a bit, you make it look kind of like fun, and then you sign it with your shaky little mouse hand over here because they hadn't invented the drawing the drawing tablet pencil yet. And there's Andy Warhol. And if you have the floppy disk that this thing came on, it's worth a small fortune. But that was the state of digital artwork not long ago. This is Dragon Con last weekend. This is no different. I mean, was this digital art? Was this fake? Was this good art? Was it bad art? The only person who gets to decide that is the person buying it. And these days, we're so used to it that we all look at it and say, that's a Warhol. That's an early digital Warhol. And people will flip out and pay $1 jillion for it. And no one thinks twice about it. But I think the part of the story that makes all the difference was that very first time when Andy Warhol picked up Mac Paint and took the mouse and he didn't drag a perfect circle like that. No, he dragged like that with the circle tool and it made a perfect circle. It's computer assisted. It's us using technology to make something that pleased us. And that's all we got going on here. This is all we're doing with AI right now is we're trying to make strong images. We're trying to make music that touches us. We're trying to make art that moves us. We're trying to express ourselves, whether in, fiery explosions on sound stages, that are virtual because we never could have afforded to blow up, the Empire State Building, but we can do it digitally. We want to tell good stories. We want to do all the things that humans want to do to tell our stuff. And yes, the people who don't have all the money, the people who have a lot of gumption, who have a lot of initiative, who have a lot of desire to put something out there in the world are going to be the people who beg, borrow, cheat, and steal every tool that they can possibly do in order to make those stories come to life. It's the way it's always been and the way it always will be. I grew up as a drummer. It's like, my entire life has been like, learning a hard technical skill and then having technology come in 5 minutes later and destroy everything I just learned how to do. You learn how to record, tune drums. You learn how to record drums. You learn all the ways to get 18 different sounds out of a drum head and everything. And then some jerk comes in with a drum machine with professionally recorded drums from Steve Gadd, and you're like, what the hell am I even trying for? And then in the end, you figure out, well, okay, yeah, it's got that going for it, but I've got this going for me. And you figure out something unique that you've got to bring to the party. And then you combine that with all the tools that the other things have got. And then that's where you make your mark. That's how we all survive this. Now, there's going to be a lot of people who do not have that mindset, who do not have the gumption. I think the most normal human thing in the world is to want to break the looms. It's to want to go all Ned Ludd. It's to want to get on Blue Sky and scream at the poor artist who was showing off stuff that people loved, that people were laying money down for, and say, you're unclean. You use the bad thing that we're all going to be using a year from now, but we're going to cast you out as one of the refuse today, and we can enjoy our moral, satisfaction of that whole thing. I think that's small-minded and crummy and not really a great way to be a good human being. I think what you need to do is you need to use whatever tools that you've got at your disposal and create something that people want. And that's how you bring value to the world. You don't bring value to the world by inciting moral panics. You don't bring value to the world by, just screaming. I think you have to create something. And the fact that the technology is here and it seems unstoppable, I think that's all it is. I'm going to share one last thing with you. I'm sorry, I saw it in my photo reel. I was going to close this, but this little going home thing, I'll close with something a little bit more upscale, upbeat. So You guys might know if you're following on Metropolis, I pull a lot of late nights and I listen to a lot of music, on as I'm working, on the next version of ComicBase. And after being, I was one of the top 0.75% of all fans for Pulp. I apparently listened to more Pulp videos than pretty much anyone else on the planet last month. Apparently, I did the same thing for the Kaiser Chiefs this month. But just to mix things up, I also turned into some other new music. And this is a band. It's not new entirely. It's a band called the Ting Tings. They're 2009 is actually when they made it big. They're new to me because I'm an old fart. It's a two-person band. It's a gal who, in this song, it's called "That's Not My Name" is the video. Worth looking up. It's kind of fun. It's funky. There's a dude who plays drums, has different bass patterns and stuff like that going through the whole thing. But basically, he's playing drums, she's singing, and somehow they turn into a pop hit. I want you to notice a couple things about this. This is a still frame from the video. You've got her. She's got a microphone. She does use the microphone through the video. Yes, she's singing along to a recorded track, but let's leave that out for now. So there's a guitar hanging out on the side. What's the guitar for? What's the drum for? Well, they show him hitting the drum at different points because it's all about drums. That guitar never gets picked up this entire video. Why? Because, well, the guitar, she does not play guitar on the video whatsoever. She's got everything on her hands that she can singing, but she still plays some cool games to get things done. They're a two-person band. They met at she was a barmaid, and he was producing tracks for the people who would come in for karaoke and do other acts that came in the bar. And they took their name from I guess somebody they worked with who she was a Chinese gal. Her name Ting Ting means something like stage or something like that, or in Chinese where it sounded a bit like that word, but they said, close enough. We'll call ourselves the Ting Ting. So this is them on Jools Holland. And there's a bit more. This is a big birthday celebration for Jools Holland, and you can see a little bit more of what's going on. So you see his drum set going on in the back here. You can kind of get the idea. There's more of a drum kit going on. There's bass amps, different things like that. They actually show, if you can see way over on the right, that there is actually a band in the back that's playing along with the drum, with the bass lines and things like that you hear on the album. But very, very importantly, look down at her feet, because there's a part at the end of the song where it's two people. They had a bar act. They wanted to make it big. So what are you going to do if you want to make it big, but there's only two of you? You're going to cheat, and you're going to use tech in order to get someplace you couldn't have done otherwise. So they did this originally by, he starts playing, he kicks off a bass line that's pre-recorded, and it plays along with him. He sings vocals, backing her vocals. And she, at one point, we'll go in there, and there's a frame where you can see that she's got a little tiny device down at her feet, because she's going to sing a middle, chorus on the whole thing. And this is a device called a digital delay line, DDL. What it does is it's a small sample and repeat kind of deal. She hits one pedal, and then it says, "I'm going to record what I'm doing here," and she sings the things like, "Are you calling me that?" And then she will do that a few times during the break, and then she's going to hit the other she's going to hit the other pedal, and it will start playing her own voice that she just recorded back to her as she then sings the other verse on top of herself that she just looped 5 seconds earlier. And then the whole thing builds to a huge crescendo, and it works beautifully, and it's a lot of fun. And it's inspirational because it's two guys who, out of desperation and a little bit of tech, made something that brought a lot of happiness to a lot of people. And it was just what was different. What did they do that other people didn't have available to them? Nothing. They did it with cheap stuff that anyone could have bought at the local guitar center. They did it with a bit of initiative, a bit of songwriting, a lot of moxie, and a lot of scramble and a lot of hustle. And honestly, that's going to be the answer of how we get ahead in the years to follow. It's not going to be screaming at people saying, "Hey, you used a pre-recorded track." Yeah, I did. So what? Anyway, that's about it, guys. We will talk more on this later, I'm sure. But anyway, have a great one. I will see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.